Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander. Lindsay, great to have you on the show.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Let's grow some agencies.
Yeah, well, that's always the goal. So you're in San Diego, I think I saw.
Actually, I just got married and moved to Louisiana, which is like everyone's sleeping on Louisiana. This place is amazing. We're crushing it in real estate and all kinds of stuff. So,
Right on. I actually am a big New Orleans file, so
wow.
go down. I've probably been down a good half dozen times. I love it down there.
Today is Mardi Gras, or it's Mardi Gras. So
I know I should. Well, I guess I'm not that much of a New Orleans file since I forgot that. I knew it was around now, but I guess I missed the day. So are you in the Big Easy itself, or
I'm learning? No, we're totally suburbians. We live across the lake, so like 45 minutes away in the suburbs.
Towards like Metairie or over there?
Yeah. We live in Covington, actually. We have houses in Covington and Mandeville. So kind of like across the lake on both sides.
Yeah, well, maybe not the worst place to be during the craziness of Mardi Gras, but you can always go in when you want to.
No, we're safe. We're good.
Yeah. I still need to make it at some point. But anyway, Lindsay, thanks so much for joining. And the topic, not the only topic, but is the idea of Pinterest and kind of the idea of focusing on a particular channel. And before we get into all of that and a lot more, can you just start by talking a little bit about your background and the agencies you're running and kind of how you got here?
Yeah, it's crazy. You know, I started my adult journey in the mergers and acquisition space. And so we were always kind of growing, selling brands and businesses kind of quickly. And this was back before digital marketing was like such a huge thing. But as soon as it became more of a huge thing, and this idea of getting numbers and metrics really fast, getting your business and brand ready to sell is super, super important. CAC numbers and all those kinds of things. Every investor is always looking for those specific numbers to figure out the viability of a company. And the same is true if you guys are ever consider selling your agency, that you having this ongoing recurring revenue is the most important thing in your business. So then I started running digital marketing agencies because I was like, okay, this is great. I love this. I have shiny object syndrome and I want results fast. Mergers and acquisitions are really slow. So I guess semi-fast, but not really that fast. So I love the idea of digital marketing. You can see results right away. You can see all the different things implemented in your brand. So I've worked with all different kinds of brands and the last 8 or 9 years specifically in e-commerce, and have run large SEO agencies. We actually started our own SEO agency after I was running a huge brand that we launched, like Manscaped and some of these other large brands like 10 years ago, and now doing all of our own stuff. And Pinterest is like a crazy adventure that came into the mix about 5 years ago, sort of not by my choice initially, but just started running some ads. I had really good M&A background, so I understood this idea of like the importance of the brand, building the brand, getting those new really good high quality top of funnel customers, and working that into an actual conversion direct response strategy. So Pinterest was like the perfect plan for that. And it evolved out of this idea of, okay, we're running all these SEO offers, which is the last thing to go into an e-commerce brand. And now we're adding in Pinterest, and then they launched their ads manager, and it just became this like crazy blue ocean space that nobody else was really doing. So I just dove into the deep end, and that created, we can talk about positioning, all of that different stuff for the agency, but that blue ocean space really created this opportunity for me to be in a world where every other channel it's in some way formidably established. So, and most people are not really either haven't explored Pinterest, they haven't had success on Pinterest, or they just have no idea about Pinterest. So it's been a crazy journey.
And the groaning pun, but I put a pin in a few things that I do want to circle back to. But I guess before we do that, can you talk about the quote unquote brand architecture of your agencies and just kind of like what you're doing where?
Yeah. So we actually have adopted, after many conversations with Nick Shackelford, he's amazing. And his head of growth was who I used to be under. I started my marketing agency life with many years ago. So I created essentially, it's a pod structure. So I have our larger brand. It's called Brand Ranks because it's all about SEO. It's organic ranking because that's my deep level mastery. And then with this idea of positioning, I realized very quickly that if you're in a certain niche, you do way better, you get way more visibility. So now we create essentially pods for different niches of our business. And one of those pods is Pinterest for Profit, or Pins for Profit. Mm-hmm. It's an entire brand that we developed technically it's under Brand Ranks, but it's a pod called Pin for Profit that's essentially just Pinterest marketing. So everything that we do from a branding perspective, from an ad perspective, we have courses and all these different things that we've created are just specifically for Pinterest. And then I have another pod that's called Salon Talk Media. TikTok is a huge thing. My business partner is amazing with salons. He's been in the stylist industry for a long, long time. I was looking for a new revenue stream and just kind of wanted to get into TikTok, but I didn't know if we were going to transition all of our e-commerce brands. And so initially, and because Brand Ranks does a lot of local brands and local business and e-commerce ranking for SEO, I was like, okay, we want to jump into TikTok. I have a lot of friends. My husband has a business partner who's crushing it on TikTok ads for local business. It's a very new, again, this blue ocean space. Nobody's doing it. Very few industries are doing it yet. And they just launched their location targeting. So now it's available to actually select and target different zip codes, which it wasn't. So we're like, okay, we're on this. We're creating pods for lawyers and different things that have their own established brand underneath the umbrella, but each brand is marketed as its own brand for its own demographics, its own audience, all of that kind of stuff that takes the guesswork out of trying to be everything to everybody.
Yeah, that's super interesting,
Yeah.
and it makes a lot of sense. And that was going to be kind of my next question, is kind of how do you deal with the platform risk? What if Pinterest does something overnight that screws up,
Yes.
that moves your cheese around? But it sounds like the pod structure is kind of how you can mitigate that. I guess one question is, it sounds like you've worked in agencies, you've worked in M&A. What's the workload like managing a bunch of different pods? Is it manageable? How do you deal with staying ahead of all of them?
So the only way that I would ever do it is with a partner who's handling at least some of the top level workload. So I have excellent staff, like as far as client relationship managers, project managers, creative designers. I have an amazing tech team, all of that kind of stuff that I had built out over years of just owning an agency. And they were able to do different things, cross-channel setup when it comes to pixeling, or we have built our own custom reports. So I already had this whole structure in place for a lot of the different things. I've run a million ads myself, so I know what's working for info products, generating leads, generating new clients. So I had the gift of being able to have a lot of the structures and design of the agency down and created. And I know what's working for lead gen and that kind of thing. And then having a partner who wants to own, like, for example, Will is my partner in Salon Talk. He's amazing. He has a background with salons. He already had an established presence and that kind of thing. So he was able to bring that to the table. And he's just as equally yoked as I am when it comes to doing the work, getting your hands dirty, not being afraid. Nothing is too good for either of us. Like, I literally can do anything, and so can he. And so I felt like we were a good partner. And there's so many other things that we've been dealing with too, about just emotional stuff and things in our family and all this stuff that kind of tries to get in the way. And we are equally yoked on how we are attacking those problems together, as opposed to just letting things fester and get chaos and whatever. You cannot do that. You have to have someone who's totally equally yoked and their strengths kind of mirror yours in different ways. And he's really good at social media, and he wants to do sales and take all the sales calls. And I'm like, yes, go ahead. I'll do operations and I'll do the speaking engagements, and I'll get us into places that he probably doesn't have relationships, and he doesn't have as much of an establishment with the fulfillment side.
That makes sense. And what I like about that model is usually the way that you see agencies diversifying is they kind of do like what I like to call day trading, where they're like, well, this niche over here is hot right now, where we just got this cool new client over there. Let's just like keep doubling down on that and chase that around. And then what happens is, like, as you get into a niche, you find out there's so many unknown unknowns. There's so much you don't know about it. Even just the lingo people use and just what they're going through. I mean, even just, we focus on the agency space, and there's still new things I'm learning every day after years. And it's like, I can't imagine just bouncing around every 5 minutes. So what I like is, it seems like you've kind of taken an M&A perspective on this, and you're like shortcutting growth by finding an actual specialist to be a partner in that space, and then kind of adding fuel to that fire. Is that fair, or how would you kind of describe it?
Yeah, that's fair. And then now we're taking it to an even another level that I haven't even really fully launched to the public yet, but we're actually creating agency funds where you can come in. If you wanted to start an agency, you can buy into a fund, and you don't have to create, since I already have all the operations and everything else already created, so that you can make money and make a percentage as an investment vehicle. as opposed to just having to go in and grind it out and be a part of it. But you love the agency life, and maybe you have one set of skills or whatever. So that's a really interesting development in the next couple of months that's going to be launched. I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I guess to kind of circle back to Pinterest a little bit,
Yeah.
what is it that in your opinion makes Pinterest special?
Yeah. So Pinterest is, like I said, it's a blue ocean space. Most people that are on there from the business side are not like what we would consider savvy agencies or savvy brands or business owners for the most part. They're starting, I mean, they're coming more onto it. But even I see, like, I audit all different kinds of accounts and they're not thinking of it as its own channel. They're kind of like applying a Facebook strategy or whatever, not realizing that this is actually a search engine. So if you use search buying behavior and you use a search engine perspective, but because my background is search engine with SEO and YouTube and even TikTok now, I approach it from fitting that in and adding fuel to the fire on our SEO strategies, as opposed to just this is a channel and whatever, and you're treating it like most people are treating it like a social channel. It's not like that. The people that are on Pinterest are educated, they're experienced, they have money, they're planning purchases, they have high purchaser intent. Over 50% of users are on the platform at least once a week. 80 to 90% of people have made at least one purchase on Pinterest. So that intention is very high. Now, there are some challenges. The delayed attribution buying behavior is like a nightmare. We've had to create our own reports for this. Definitely you have challenges because this is the only platform where someone can see an image, save it, come back later and purchase. Yes, Facebook sort of has that and Instagram sort of has that, but that doesn't factor into any buying behavior 99% of the time. With Pinterest, that is 99% of the buying behavior.
Yeah.
So you have a longer buying cycle. You have to make sure that a brand is actually like very aware of what it's going to take to make it work on there. And then we apply essentially our SEO strategies with almost like a link building perspective, where we have implemented an influencer marketing network where we create communities that are allowing us access to their users, essentially, to share our content, get more virality, get more visibility, get more links and tractions through an integrated influencer marketing strategy, which is similar to how you would do it for link building. You get authority in the search engine that way. So then you're ranking higher, you're getting more visibility, you have longer term lasting results. And that we've noticed over the last year has dramatically affected the results on our ads, because there's better visibility. People are clicking on your stuff than when they see your ad, because like 93% of searches on Pinterest are unbranded. So you have essentially a blue ocean space of brand new brands. So we're able to establish the brand much faster through search.
That makes a lot of sense and
Yeah.
kind of like a more useful mental model is thinking of it as SEO at a time where my impression is SEO has just gotten pushed down so far compared to,
which is crazy because with iOS updates and everything that's going on with tracking for ads, it has been a nightmare. And now people are back to SEO again, understanding that building a community, building a good long-term search strategy has much more staying power for many brands. And then you also have things like ad bans and whatever. I can't tell you how many clients we've taken on that their supplement is not approved by Facebook. I'm just working with a credit repair company right now, and they can't get anything approved on any channels. I'm like, okay, we'll crush it on, you can do anything on Pinterest organic, a lot of things on Pinterest ads that you can't do on other channels, like various supplements and whatever. And also SEO, you can do anything. So I'm ranking all kinds of random crazy stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one thing that you mentioned is that there's a longer buying cycle on Pinterest.
Yeah.
So what are the biggest niches there now? I think of weddings, my wife used Pinterest a lot when we were planning, and like, I guess that's still big, but like, what are some of the other areas and maybe ones that you wouldn't expect?
Number 1 is mom and baby brands. Number 2 is home decor. 3 would be like personal beauty, wellness type of stuff. And then we actually see some really good stuff for now for more info products. So coaching, lead gen, different stuff like that, that for building a business, there's a lot of Etsy sellers and like women who are looking for additional streams of income, who are exploring different options like that on there. So, and learning different things about business. So you've got like email marketers and different things that are teaching different parts of the business.
Yeah.
And then you've got your typical e-commerce products, and 40% of new users are actually men. So we've been taking on a lot of men's related clients. Like I've done some luxury wallets, some different hair care products, beard care products. Obviously fashion is huge on there. You can see tons of different stuff. And there's a lot of like education there as well. So even our e-commerce brands, I sort of force them to make different educational content so that you're able to capitalize on both types of viewers.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like it's expanding and like the people
Yeah.
who are using it are not what it once was. With that, to shift gears a little bit,
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about your process for growing the agencies that you're
Yeah.
working with? Are you kind of in that sole new business seat, or how are you kind of thinking about that role?
Really at the end of the day, growth comes down to lead generation. You've got to figure out some type of a unique way to position yourself to grow. And I always find that operations sort of handle themselves to some degree, at least in the beginning, if you're growing a newer agency, where you've got to figure it out. And if you're a person of integrity, which I am hoping and praying that you are, then you want to get the best results for your clients. So you're going to figure it out. And I think a lot of new businesses are created on this principle that I'm going to figure, of you personally, I'm going to figure it out. And you make a lot of sales probably with this idea in mind, and people are buying you because they trust that you know either what you're talking about or you're going to figure out a way. Because the thing about marketing, I have gotten probably less polished sometimes in my approach and just more real with people. Like, hey, it's going to take a little while. You have to set expectations clearly in the beginning. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting that relationship the entire time. So in fact, I prefer to underpromise and overdeliver every time. I'd rather underpromise them, let them know it's going to take at least 2 to 3 months to open a new channel. And in that process, there's probably going to be a lot of stuff happening. We're going to be creating new images. We're going to be looking at your landing pages, conversion rate optimization. There's all these different things that have to come into place. But if you are an excellent marketer and you're dedicated to figuring it out, you will figure it out. You'll find the right people. The right people will be attracted to you. You learn to fire fast. You learn to hire more than you think you need to and pay more probably than you think you need to, and figure out a solid lead generation strategy. If you can do that, you got this. Marketing agencies are not, you have to have a lot of skills, or you have to be willing to hire somebody who does.
That makes sense. And I'll play devil's advocate just a little bit with the kind of like old school multi-service, or kind of like not AOR, but agnostic agency model. Maybe they're focused on e-commerce. So how do you kind of deal with the man or woman with a hammer problem, right? Where you get a prospect and you're like, well, we do Pinterest ads. So here's some Pinterest ads. Like, how do you actually figure out what they need and make sure that's right for them and keep yourself in check there?
In the beginning, I feel when I started my agency life, I was taking on clients that I shouldn't have, and I just stressed myself out and whatever. And now I have really clear and strict parameters on who we will and won't take on. And I know who I can really help and who I can't. And I don't have a scarcity or desperation mentality that I have to take on everyone, because I know how many sleepless nights and waking up early to panic Slack messages and whatever life I don't want to live. That's not to say that there aren't people with intense personalities that are brand owners, because they are. There are a lot of type A's out there. They have success in their brand because they're hustlers and they don't put up with BS, and they're hungry. So if you can speak to that and you are also that person, you're automatically going to resonate with that kind of thinking. And I have just found, I tried it the other way for many years, and I was stressed out. And when I was trying to launch my own agencies, when I was working with other people and whatever, and it's like, nobody knows who you are. If you don't niche down, they don't know what to tell people to go to you for. Right. So it's such a slower growth. And we've grown 2 8-figure agencies without the need for ads. And that's because we got super niche specific. And when they come in the door after that, then I sell them other things based on what they actually need, what we can deliver. And if we can't deliver it, then I have other partners that are willing to send me the people they can't deliver on. And then I send them the people I can't deliver on.
Right. And then what you're doing in that process is you're kind of creating differentiators that are very tangible. Like, we do this very specific thing in this very specific place for this very specific person. Do you check those boxes? And if not, then we might not be a fit, which makes a lot of sense. One thing you said at the beginning of the interview, which I think is interesting, is the focus on recurring revenue and how that's kind of king, especially coming from an M&A background. And I don't disagree at all. But sometimes I feel like there's sort of a focus on recurring revenue
Mhm.
in a way where it doesn't always exist, but people are aiming for it or they think it does. If you
Yeah.
have recurring revenue, but every client's churning after 3 months, is that really recurring revenue? So I guess my question is, can you define it a little bit? Like, where do you feel like you've hit whether like you're talking in a previous life, assessing companies in M&A, or where you're at now, where do you feel like you've actually hit the wind stream of recurring revenue? And like, what does that mean to you?
I mean, you always get your glorious clients that are kind of happening in the background all the time and they're not high maintenance and like you can deliver for them and things are great and they stay forever. And then you have this model too, where even in recurring revenue doesn't necessarily mean they have to stay on forever, even from an investor perspective. If you have a good lead generation flow and your clients only last for 4 months and you work it into the model, that's feasible. You just have to be honest with the process. Like if you know, like we had a season where Pinterest was like 4 months. Nobody was last longer than 4 months. And it was because they were working on their tracking and attribution stuff. And oh my God, I thought I was going to faint. It was horrible
Yeah.
because I know as a person of excellence, I know what I can deliver on for these people. I know that I personally am excellent, but I'm limited by the software. There's only a certain amount of stuff you can do. So in the meantime, you build relationships, you have good conversations, you're honest. And this is something I learned from Eddie Malouf, who's a good friend of mine, who's amazing at growing agencies. He said to me recently, he was like, okay, so you put the service that you know you can deliver on the best, that's the longest term and most recurring, and you can get the best results. You put that at the highest price and assume that they're going to stay for longer. Everything else may fall off. You do lesser price things for those things because the churn for ads is 10 times higher than it is for SEO, for example.
Right.
So if you build that into your contracts, you build that into your thinking, then you've got a longer sustainable model. That's just my advice for sustainability. But when it comes to, because think about this, if you're looking at buying, say, an e-commerce brand, and you know that the life cycle of your average buyer is only 3 months, okay, that's fine. You're working that into the equation. You know that your AOV is whatever, $100, say, or $200, and you know that the life cycle is 3 months if it's on a subscription. Okay, that's fine. Then your goal is probably get that longer, right? Okay, so the same is true for investors. They know that your 3 month life cycle, maybe they're excellent at retention. So they're looking to acquire an agency who sucks at retention because they know that they can deliver in that area. There's a lot of different ways you can position it as long as you can just be honest and you can start thinking about, okay, what are these longer term services that I know have less churn? And then how do I work those in with services that I know are going to have high churn? Because you're never going to, I can't tell you how many clients over the years that we had excellent results and they left for no reason. I mean,
Right.
that's just part of agency life. It sucks. It's horrible. Like, I hate that. That's my least favorite thing about agency life, especially like being somebody who's invested and a longer term thinking person. And we understand the process of ads and people,
Yeah.
they have weird expectations and they just think they're going to make $1 million in a month with no ad spend and terrible funnels and all that type of stuff. So you have to be really clear about what services you offer, but also what is it going to take for them to have success, and let them know, okay, well, we can do this, we can try it. And then you got to have a rock solid contract that says, I told you so. Like,
Yeah.
you made this decision and there's nothing that I can do outside of the limitations that you give me.
Right. And I think that definitely bears repeating. And there's so
Yeah.
much to dig into there. And we've sort of seen that with our service. It's not ads, but it's performance
Yeah.
based. And it's pretty
Mhm.
close to being an ad based agency
Yeah.
model because we're doing outbound for B2B. And it's sort of like it's a what have you done for me lately business.
Totally.
And we've had clients recently that we've worked with for like a year and a half, and they're like, yeah, we love you guys. We'd be a reference for you, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, we're gonna try this other thing over here because like it kind of slowed down this month. Right. And it's like it's been so hard for me just emotionally to deal with that, even though like anybody from the outside looking in would say this is a good outcome. They stuck around a while and that sort of thing. So to bring this to a question, when you talk about, you mentioned something interesting, which is that, if an M&A company or another organization is looking at this and they're excellent at retention and they think they can add more lifetime to that client relationship, what does that look like? What are they typically doing? What is that person that knows a lot more typically doing when they parachute in and they're like, okay, here are the levers that we can turn? And I know that's a big question, but if there's any light you can shed there.
I mean, 99% of it's going to be communication and having somebody in that role of client relationship manager that is willing to go into the hard conversations and like be emotionally invested in the clients with their emotional roller coaster stuff. So if you have somebody like that, and it does take, in my opinion, somebody with a specific kind of personality, like who's willing to, I mean, but you also have to set limits and you have to set boundaries, but 99% of that stuff is handled ahead of time with the expectations and with communication. So having ongoing communication is excellent. Number two, like changing your offers. Like I said, there's a guy that I know that does like sprints, essentially, like where he'll do like a 3-month contract for this, a 3-month contract for that. And like you're doing almost like a phased out plan. You can also do longer contracts where people are just like required to do longer contracts. I used to do only month to month forever because I hated being in long contracts myself.
Yeah.
And then now I was like, okay, well, that's idiotic. I have a massive business to run and tens of thousands of employees, it feels like sometimes, or tens of thousands of dollars in payroll every month or every 2 weeks even. So I'm like, okay, I got to at least do 90 days. So we recently even switched our contracts to 90 days. For SEO, it's always been longer because it takes longer. So doing some of those types of things to mitigate it, creating good reporting structures, staying ahead of the curve when you think there's going to be a problem, those kinds of things, keeping in communication with them to let them know why the ads, like we just recently had a new client. She's amazing, but our ads, like for the first 3 weeks, were just trash. Seemed like we couldn't get anything to work. And then finally it just clicked. And then now we're getting tons of leads for her, which is great. But geez, that first 3 weeks was a grind. And we basically just agreed, like, okay, we love her. We know she's going to be an amazing testimonial. Her dad's connected with all these people. Like, we just basically, we had in the back of our mind, we're going to give her a strategy like, hey, okay, if this doesn't work, we're going to give you a month free just because of our personal desire to help her. So giving her a month of the retainer free just so that we could get her results. And people do things like they change to performance models, like what you guys have done. I did that for many years and I just couldn't do it because I couldn't stand people nickel and diming me for like per lead or whatever. This lead's not qualified or whatever.
And to be clear, we don't charge like that either. Yeah.
Okay, good.
But
Praise God.
Performance based and performance emphasis. Like we're trying to get an outcome that's specific and measurable.
So there you go. You get creative. You just have to stay on top of it and get creative. You create systems. You have good reports. Like we do nice custom reports. We do a certain amount of meetings. We're available on Slack. We're like making sure that if a client responds on Slack, like we have a whole protocol that they need to at least have some kind of emoji right away that we receive the message. So then we're not leaving them on red for 5 hours.
Yeah.
If I'm not available or their client relationship person's not available, then somebody in the organization is going in there and messaging them like, hey, we got this.
Right. One thing that you said is like, when you get a situation where you're like, okay, well, there's sort of this push pull of like, we're going to try to make everything better and increase retention. And there's a certain amount of acceptance where you're just sort of like, well, this is just kind of how it's going to pan out. Like there's, if you're a growth stage e-commerce brand, you're probably going to buy Pinterest ads for 3, 6, 9 months or whatever. How do you balance those two things? Like when do you know you're like, okay, this is probably about as good of the retention as we're going to get? Because what you've probably seen is there's like a logarithmic challenge. As you increase retention, it gets harder and harder to increase it even more. First, assuming you agree with that, how do you sort of balance those two forces? And how do you know when you've hit the limit?
Again, everything is solved by lead generation.
Yeah.
Get more leads, get more clients in the door, and you're much less stressed about that period. It is stressful and there is a balance and you do kind of have to accept it. There is a certain amount of fighting with and for a client. And then it also is your personal preference to where at some point you don't want to constantly keep convincing them of what's best for them. So it really just depends on you. And, some people get nasty and I'm like, okay, well, I could give a crap. You can leave. Here's your 30-day notice. I'll give you the 30-day notice. Just leave me alone.
Right.
So it just, some of it's personal preference. So, or if they're mean to my staff or something like that, no, they got to go. Right. So you have like your own boundaries. Thankfully, we have amazing clients and that very rarely happens. The other thing is we protect ourselves extremely well with our contracts are literally rock solid. I have never lost a dispute in I don't know how many years. Not that we've had very many, but the few that we have had, people are unreasonable. That's just part of the world. So we've had to deal with things that are unreasonable. But you protect yourself ahead of time. You set your expectations ahead of time and you hope and pray for the best and do your best no matter what. And your personality and your desire and drive to do the best speaks volumes to clients. So
Absolutely, and agree with all that. And I guess one thing I was kind of getting at is like,
Yeah.
if you know your retention, if you have all this data and you've done this for a while and you're optimized and you know your retention is like, let's say 6 months,
Yeah.
would you then just plan for that and say, okay, after 6 months, we're going to move to this other service that's less money or is something else or whatever? And if so, how are you thinking about that with what you're doing on Pinterest with your other agencies?
Yeah, so we always try, at least in the beginning, to get them on multiple services. So they are doing some SEO too, which I know will work, mixed with services that I know may be shorter lived. We also do some Pinterest organic, which I know is going to be like a longer term strategy. So we try and essentially like separate them out. So like even our contracts are written line by line on what. So if somebody comes in and says, okay, well, we just don't think Pinterest is getting results or whatever, then we'll say, okay, that sounds good. Everything else is looking good. All the rest of our services are excellent. If you wanted to try, and I mean, I've downsell, I would say some clients, if it's a brand new brand, sometimes it takes longer to get results or their conversion rates are just terrible or whatever. And I'll just come in and say, hey, we did a valiant effort on ads for this season or this holiday. Let's wait, do some organic for the next 2 months or 3 months until the next holiday. And then we'll be maybe more ready for ads. So I'm flexible. I'm reasonable. I'm a business owner. If someone's flexible and reasonable with me, I'm much more likely to engage with them on something that I know is going to work. So you just have to be flexible and create something that you think is going to work for them.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And with that, one thing that you mentioned earlier is that you're developing courses and
Yeah.
education on Pinterest, which is selfishly super timely for me because
It
we're
is.
we're rolling out a training program, and it seems like a long time coming because we've had a pretty high ticket done for you service to do outreach in the B2B space for agencies, and then for so long the price tag's been high enough that it cancels out a lot of our audience because they're just not there yet. It's like the
Yeah.
investment of a full-time person. So we're basically making a done with you program, which I heard from somebody sounds like done with you, like I'm done with you. So I've got to rephrase that.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah, I was like, I never thought about that either. I was like, that does sound kind of weird.
No, it's done with you. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
excellent. We have a done with you program too. Not everybody's ready for the done for you.
cool.
So you
Yeah,
got to adapt to the needs of your consumer.
right. And can you talk about that a little bit more? Like,
Yeah.
is that a track where you go from one to the other, or is it a completely separate track? Do you market it differently? How do you guys kind of slot that into the
I
architecture?
mean, we essentially market it as its own course setup or coaching program course
Mhm.
setup. Each of our courses has their own name. And then we have the Pin Ads Academy, which is like the larger coaching program that includes the suite of courses plus the group coaching. So, yeah, but essentially, I mean, it's still really branded very similar. I
Yeah.
didn't go out and build a whole thing for Pin Ads Academy. I don't have time to do all that. It's still branded essentially under the Pins for Profit. Our ads are run from the Pins for Profit account for the Pin Ads Academy. And then we do a lot of low ticket lead generation things to try to figure out what it was going to take. We did live events, we did webinars, we did low ticket product sales to higher ticket upsells to book a call funnels to all different kinds of stuff to test and figure out what is it going to take to get a new client in your coaching programs. But we had to adapt too, because like I said before, there are a lot of brands that are on Pinterest that are not ready. They're not spending e-commerce money on done for you agencies, and they can't really justify it. And I am doing the same amount of work most of the time for a small brand as I would be doing for a big brand. So I don't really have a lot of flexibility to some degree in my pricing because I'm doing the same stuff. So yeah, that's where we had to get creative and kind of start creating either that, or if you're going to lower your prices, then you need to reduce your service deliverables. But I would say it's lucrative for sure. And it really depends on your own personal timing desire, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Because you do have to be committed. But once you build a program like that, it's built.
Right.
So you can add people in at any time.
Yeah, and that's what I've been working through, and so far so good. I've been enjoying the process of working with people and building the courses and everything. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I found that it's really hard to find this middle ground, at least for me personally, in terms of the done for you. Like either it has to be throwing everything at the wall and the whole thing,
Yeah.
or we just show you how to do it and give you information.
Exactly, because otherwise it's not going to work. I'm
Yeah.
like, do you want results? Because if you want results, this is what it's going to take to move the needle for you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why?
Yeah, exactly. And just to get into the weeds and get a little tactical, what does the coaching program look like for
Yeah.
you? Are you doing a group call? Are you meeting on one-on-one with people? Do you have your own coaches are you not
Yeah.
involved? Like, what does it look like?
Yeah. So I do a weekly call We have, when they first sign up, they get a one-on-one audit where they have to pre-submit their information. So I'm not just looking at a blank screen and have to do all the work myself. They fill out a full questionnaire. Every week they have to pre-submit questions for the call. So it's not, I mean, there's time at the end if it's feasible for me to ask questions that are not pre-submitted, but I'm a firm believer that you train people on how to respond, especially in your group coaching program. Then we also have a Facebook group where people can ask questions. And if you submit your question ahead of time, you will get a recording of the answer. So I usually answer it in the group call. If I don't have time to get to everything, then I'll just do a little Loom video and say, hey, here's this. And usually I'll add the group calls into the student center. Everyone gets access to the full student center. We also have a client concierge on staff. So if somebody has questions or they need something urgently, they can reach out to Christine on Facebook and they can pre-submit their questions, which come to me in a form before the call. So I know, okay, what am I going over? It's not just like a random, I mean, it is, and I'm fine with the randomness of it, but I like them to be good and working on their stuff so that we're not going over every piece of the education on the call. This is supposed to be a time for Q&A, for me to go over certain things.
Yeah.
That kind
That
of
makes
thing.
sense.
And
Right,
then, yeah,
right.
so we meet weekly for 6 months.
Gotcha. That's really helpful. And that allows kind of everybody else to learn from each other, which
Yeah.
is the right way to do it. So that's great. And Lindsay, kind of getting towards the end of our time,
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about how you're working, assuming you are, like how you're
Yeah.
working with agencies these days and what you're doing there?
Yeah. So mostly I do one-on-one coaching lately, it seems. I had a program that we were working on. It's called Bankable Digital Agency. It's still not fully launched, but it has a full tech library and working with agency owners in a group coaching type of way. But because my husband works with Joel Kaplan and does like all of their agency lab stuff, I kind of got more involved with coaching through that sense of actually being able to help him. And he's coaching other agency owners. And so, like, answering the questions and doing all that stuff. And I realized I wasn't sure if that was the direction I was going to go, because we're doing so much stuff now with funds and real estate and actually building funds for agencies. So really that's more what I'm doing, is creating like the funds and investment opportunities. And then if somebody needs help or wants coaching, then I just do mostly one-on-one.
That makes sense. And that's
Yeah.
probably a, fun and compelling thing to do when
Yeah.
it comes up. So that's great. So Lindsay, this has been, I've definitely learned a lot from this and really appreciate your time. How can people follow what you're up to and get in touch and all that good stuff?
Yeah, you can find me on any social channel at Lindsay B. Shearer, lindsayshearer.com or pensforprofit.com. You can check us out. We've got a lot of cool stuff going on social and all that good stuff.
Cool. We'll get all that linked up. Lindsay, thanks again.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.